Are you looking to quickly understand the conjugate system? Well, I'm going to break that down for you here today in about 8 minutes or less. Let's get into it. Hey there, Smitley here from Thirst Gym, and I'm going to help you understand the conjugate system in the most simplest terms possible today. Now, I'm going to be very upfront with you. In terms of conjugate, I'm going off of what Louis Simmons did at Westside Barbell. Now, I was very fortunate to be able to train with Louis a couple times at Westside. I'm obviously affiliated with Elite FTS and have been for over a decade, and picked up a lot of my conjugate knowledge from Dave Tate, who learned all his stuff from Louis Simmons as well. So I've got a good understanding of the system and the people I've been surrounded by in about the past 15 years of doing strength and conditioning and powerlifting. Now, the reason I bring this up is because really we could argue this is a concurrent-based system, but for simplicity, we're going to talk about the conjugate method that Louis used at Westside. And I'll be very clear, you're not really doing Westside unless if you're at Westside. So I also want to get that out of the line and out of the way, that if you're really looking to see what Westside is currently doing, now I would recommend reaching out to Tom and Westside Barbell directly, because I'm sure what they're doing now is different than what they were doing whenever I visited and went there, and also from the time that I took away certain things. But we're going to break down the simplicity of that system. All right, so for the conjugate system, there's really 4 major things you need to understand here. You understand the max effort method, the dynamic effort method, the repetition effort method, and then the GPP-based days that Louis used as active recovery through Westside Barbell and the conjugate method. Now, the max effort method means that we're going to work up to a heavy set of 1 or a 1 rep max, a 2 rep max, and sometimes a 3 rep max. Generally, it would be a 1 rep max whenever this was being used at Westside. And then you would pick different variations and movements to essentially max out on every single week for that max effort day. Now, there was a max effort lower and there's a max effort upper. So the lower exercises are usually going to be your squat or your deadlift. At Westside, at the time that I learned the conjugate method, the squat variations for max effort were making up about 60 to 70% of the variations, and the rest would either come from deadlifts or good mornings. I think they started to drift more towards deadlifts whenever I was there, but I know Dave has said that they were even use good morning max effort variations about 1 to twice every 10 to 12 week cycles. So you can kind of get an idea of how frequently they would max out on their good morning variations. But I think they've kind of strayed from that. Again, check out with westsidebarbell.com to see exactly what they're currently doing. But as of the way that I learned the system, that's what they initially were doing. And they would do the same thing on their upper body day or their bench press day. They would work up to a 1 rep max on a particular variation, and then they would cycle those variations so that they would not get stagnant. They would not continue to bang their body up. But what Louis found is they could train at 90% or higher every single week year round by changing the variations, and that would let the body be able to handle those loads and learn how to grind through heavy weights. Then on your max effort days, after that, what I learned from Dave Tate, and what I also call it as well, is the next is your supplemental exercise. And that's going to be the exercise that is going to help drive the max effort movement that you did for the day. Now, usually you would work up to a hard set of like 3 to 5 on this. I've even seen people work up to hard 6s, hard 8s, but I think generally 3 to 5 is kind of that place to be. And now more so things have kind of drifted towards doing a little bit more volume there. There might be 2 sets or 3 sets of 5. But again, when I learned this from Louis directly and from Dave Tate directly, at the time it was a hard set of 3 to 5, which is 1 hard set. Again, it's going to drive that max effort motion. That supplemental movement would usually stick around for a little bit, usually 2-3 weeks, or they might even use that same variation in the max effort day and the dynamic effort day, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. But basically, they would try to tap that movement out, milk it for what they could before they recycle the supplemental exercise. Then your accessory work for your lower body would then follow, usually with some kind of posterior chain exercise, glute and hamstring driven. So usually talking about reverse hypers, glute ham raises, could be inverse curls, could be RDLs, anything like that, dimble deadlifts, things like that that's going to directly target the posterior chain. And then usually after that would be your true accessory exercises. That's usually upper back, lat, abs, and lower back is kind of where that would fall. So that's where you would find that reverse hyper, you'd find direct abdominal work, you'd find extra lat pull downs or shrugs or chest supported row variations, things like that. Extra face pulls would all fall in that session. And so that's kind of how the session from the max effort lower would go. Then if you go to the dynamic effort lower, Basically everything's the same, but you're going to have a speed-based day. So now you're going to have a variation of your squat that's going to be as fast as you can against bands or chains, usually around 50 to 60% of your bar load. I've seen this now. I personally wave this down to around as low as 40%, but again, when I learned it, it was usually around that 50 to 60% range for 10 to 8 doubles on your squat, almost always a box squat in the fashion of Louis doing it. And then you would usually do a speed deadlift variation. Again, same thing, 50, 60% of 8 to 12 singles, usually against bands or chains. And then you would just do the same thing. You do a supplemental based movement, and then you'd pick a couple accessory exercises for back, low back, and abs, and glutes and hamstrings, and you're really kind of set. So you kind of pick some different things here. Again, those are usually the quicker days, and those were the days that I always visited Westside, were always the dynamic effort, lower days. So now when it comes to the upper body, we kind of just take the same thought process here. We do with bench press. We pick that main movement, we pick a supplemental where we work up to hard set of 3 to 5, and then we focus more again on chest, shoulders, and triceps, and they were very heavy in the tricep here, so that's where you'd find like your rollbacks, your JMs, your press downs, your skull crushers, your dips. Those were all those kind of things to find. Then they would do extra back work, a lot of extra rows and shoulder work, and that was a very, pretty quick session, but that's what they would kind of go off of the day. And obviously if they're getting in their shirt or their gear, that stuff kind of changed a little bit, but I'm not going to go into that kind of nuance. And then on the dynamic effort day, they basically do the same thing. They speed bench press, so bench pressing against bands or chains. Again, about 8 to 10 triples was kind of the norm at Westside at the time. They're kind of going towards some more 5s, I think, now, but you get the idea. If you're doing very direct speed work, then you're going to do a supplemental movement, usually work up either with that same set, or you kind of do another different pressing variation. I know they really like the overhead pin press was a big one, the incline press was a big one, things like that. And then, you usually see things like chins and rows and more delt work and more tricep work in that session. And so usually their normal layout was max effort lower was Monday, max effort upper was Wednesday, dynamic effort lower was Friday, and dynamic effort upper was on Saturday. That was the schedule whenever I would always go to visit there, and I would usually always come in on a Friday and or Saturday to be able to train. Now, again, they could be doing that differently now, so again, I would contact Westside Barbell directly to see exactly what they're doing, but that's what they would do. Then they would have GPP field based days, where the days they weren't training, they would usually drag sleds or do very high rep based work on what they needed, usually following that subsequent session to just get blood flow going in those direct areas. Louis was big on the sled dragging variations, but really, anything that's very single joint high rep, just get a lot of blood flow into that area to enhance the recovery. Now, the repetition method is the other aspect we got to kind of talk about here. That's basically anything that was not the speed work or the max effort work. Those are the things that you're going to do for repetitions, and Louis called these special exercises. And you're basically picking exercises that are going to drive your main lifts to get better. So the thing I really liked about that I learned from Louis on this was that you're just going to basically work up the chain. So you're basically going to work backwards. So everything that you're doing from your accessory work is to drive your supplemental. And if you pick the right supplemental exercise, that's going to drive your max effort work for the day, and then you're going to get stronger. So your special exercises, again, would then hold true for about 2 to 4 weeks. Again, just like your supplemental, you milk the hell out of those, you get what you can, and then you rotate. And that's kind of how things went. Most of the speed waves were in 3-week waves. Most of the bench waves were in 3-week waves. I know, again, they've kind of changed things a little bit, but there's plenty of different dynamic effort waves out there. I even got videos on different dynamic waves. I'll make sure I link those in the description box below. I've got lots of conjugate-based material. I'll link a lot of that below in the description box. But that's the basics of the conjugate method. Heavy work 2 days a week, speed work 2 days a week, supplemental work always following after those main drivers for the day that they're supposed to drive the main movements, and then your accessory work is just going to build up and feed up the chain, and then you just try to get your sessions done in a timely manner. 90 minutes I think is more than reasonable. If you got a big crew, max effort days might take a little bit longer. Been there, done that. But that's really the gist of the system. I mean, if you can understand that, you can milk the system for a lot of what it is. Now, does it mean that you can't go into the weeds and get more specific? Absolutely. That's why I'm going to have more detail in the description box below if you want to kind of deep dive into some of those. But I understand as somebody that was trying to learn the conjugate system early on in my career, and I was really fascinated by it, there was just so much information out there, I was kind of confused. So, I would recommend you pick up Louis' book, reach out to Westside Barbell directly. Tom's always answered questions whenever you reach out to him. You can get on EliteFTS.com and go through all of Dave Tate's material. I've got material on there as well. There's thousands of things on there regarding the conjugate system on EliteFTS. But those are the two places I would look. and you'll really find out what you need. And, you know, I'm always open to help you as well figure out how to lay out your conjugate stuff if you're kind of new to it. I do think it is a great, fantastic system. I do think some people go a little too far into some stuff. And, you know, the more experience and the stronger you get, the more you've got to dive into those weeds to milk what you can out of those systems. So, again, that's the conjugate system in a really short time frame. So if you happen to have any questions, just let me know in the comment section below. I'm more than happy to help you. If you like this video, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share with a friend that might want to know what the conjugate system is or just really looking for a very simple, basic video. Hopefully this is the one that can really do it for you. And again, I thank you and appreciate you for tuning in for today's video, and I'll see you at the next video.